The morning sun cast a golden glow on the gleaming glass and steel skyscrapers of downtown New York City, a global hub of finance and innovation. Among the most imposing towers stood the Lexington Tower, a 50-story behemoth that housed the most prestigious companies on Wall Street. On the 45th floor was the headquarters of Sterling Investments, a firm ruled with an iron fist by Robert Sterling, a man who believed his financial empire placed him above common mortals. On that Monday, Robert arrived at the private parking garage, driving his imported Ferrari. He pulled into the spot with his name etched on a gold plaque and adjusted the knot of his bespoke Italian silk tie in the rearview mirror. At 45, Robert maintained an impeccable appearance, strategically trimmed graying hair, a tailor-made suit that cost $250,000, and a Swiss watch that he wore as a trophy of his conquests. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," the building's security guard greeted. Bowing slightly, Robert merely gave a dismissive nod, his eyes glued to his latest model iPhone. To him, employees like this were simply part of the scenery, not deserving of his full attention. As he walked through the marble lobby toward the exclusive elevators, Robert moved like a king among his subjects. Employees averted their gazes, others forced nervous smiles. Everyone knew about his volatile temper and how a single wrong word could cost them their job. In the elevator, he pressed the button for the 45th floor and started a phone call, not caring about the other two occupants who seemed to shrink into the corners of the cab. "Mark, I'm not interested in excuses. That property has to be ours by the end of the month. If the owner won't sell at our price, find something on him. Everyone has a weakness, a hidden debt, a family secret." He paused, noticing the other occupants trying to pretend they weren't listening. "We'll talk more later in my office." The elevator stopped on the 20th floor, and the two occupants rushed out as if they could finally breathe. Robert smiled internally. He loved this feeling of power, of intimidating people without even trying. Arriving on the 45th floor, his assistant Lauren was already waiting with a folder of documents and a cup of coffee, prepared exactly as he liked it. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. You have a board meeting at 10 a.m., lunch with the city development director at noon, and at 3 p.m., a video conference with the Dubai investors." Robert took the cup without a word of thanks. "Cancel lunch with the director. Say something urgent came up. That incompetent just wants more money for his re-election campaign. And have someone clean my office. It still smells like cheap cleaning products from last week." Lauren nodded, hiding her discomfort. She had worked for Robert for 5 years and still hadn't gotten used to his contempt for others. But the salary she received allowed her to support her ailing mother and pay for her younger sister's college, a price many were willing to pay to endure the daily hell of working with Robert Sterling. Inside his office, Robert gazed at the panoramic view of the city. From there, he could see the stark contrast between the upscale neighborhoods and the more modest parts of NYC. To him, that view perfectly represented how the world worked. Some were born to be at the top, looking down while others were condemned to crawl down below. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Clara from Empire Realty is on the line," Lauren announced over the intercom. Robert answered with a smile he never showed in the office. Clara was in charge of negotiating a strategic property near Central Park, where Robert planned to build a luxury residential complex that would double his net worth. "Clara, my dear, tell me you have good news." "Good morning, Robert. I'm afraid we have a problem. The property was sold yesterday afternoon." Robert felt his blood boil. "What do you mean sold? To whom?" "A company called Santos Enterprises. From what I heard, they paid in cash way above market value." "Santos Enterprises? Never heard of them. Who are these amateurs?" Robert slammed his fist on the table so hard that his gold pen rolled onto the floor. "Find out everything about them. I want to know who is behind this and how they managed to get ahead of me." After hanging up, Robert remained looking out the window, his view now clouded by rage. In his 20 years as a businessman in New York, he had built a reputation based on fear. No one crossed his business. No one dared to compete on his turf. The intercom buzzed again. "Mr. Sterling, a reminder that in 30 minutes, the meeting with the board about the financial department layoffs begins." Robert smiled. Layoffs were one of his favorite parts of the job. There was something exciting about deciding people's professional fates, about seeing the despair in the eyes of those who received the news. For him, it was just another way to wield power. Get the list of names ready. I want Johnson out. That idiot questioned my decision at the last meeting. Robert adjusted the watch on his wrist. And have a new coffee brought in. This one's gone cold. As he waited, his thoughts returned to this Santos Enterprises. Who would dare compete with him in New York? It didn't matter. Just like so many others who had tried, they would quickly learn that Robert Sterling wasn't just a successful businessman, he was a predator in the world of business. What Robert didn't know was that at that very moment, a 52-year-old woman, dressed in a simple cleaning uniform, was discreetly entering the lobby of the Lexington Tower. With a badge that identified her only as Maria General Services, she watched everything attentively, registering every interaction, every glance, every gesture of the hurried employees and executives who rendered her invisible. Few would imagine that this gray-haired woman, her hair partially hidden under a simple cap, carrying cleaning supplies, was about to forever transform the empire that Robert Sterling believed to be unassailable. As Robert Sterling conducted his meeting on the 45th floor, Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the hallways of the 40th floor of the Lexington Tower. Her keen eyes didn't miss a detail, from the way executives treated their assistants to the wasted paper in the printers. She mentally noted each observation, building a puzzle that would reveal the true culture of that corporate environment. Maria had grown up in the working-class neighborhoods of Queens, the daughter of a laundress and a carpenter who taught her the value of honest work. From an early age, she showed exceptional intelligence, earning scholarships that took her to a top-tier business school. Over 3 decades, she transformed a small hardware store inherited from her father into one of the largest corporate groups in the country, always upholding her principles and valuing people above profit. Now, at 52, Maria was the president of the Santos Group, a conglomerate that included Santos Enterprises, the company that had just acquired the Lexington Tower and several other commercial properties in NYC. But few knew her face. She preferred to stay out of the spotlight, focusing on the sustainable expansion of her businesses and the well-being of her over 10,000 employees across the United States. "Do you need help with that?" a young assistant asked, noticing Maria struggling to push the heavy cart over a small step in the hallway. "Thank you, Sand," she replied with a genuine smile, watching how the young man helped without hesitation, despite his well-cut suit that contrasted with her simple uniform. "Are you new here?" "I don't remember seeing you before," he commented while straightening his tie after the small effort. "I started today. I'm still getting to know the building," Maria replied, sticking to her cover story. "You seem to like your job." "Yeah, I do, but..." The young man looked around, making sure they were alone. "The atmosphere can be pretty toxic sometimes, especially when Mr. Sterling is in a bad mood, which is almost every day," he finished with a nervous laugh. Maria nodded understandingly. "I've worked in places like that. It's tough when bosses forget that everyone is human." "Exactly." The young man seemed relieved to find someone who understood. "Oh, I'm Chris, a junior financial analyst." "Nice to meet you, Chris. I'm Maria." After a brief chat, Chris had to get back to work, and Maria continued her undercover inspection. This wasn't the first time she had used this method. Her immersion technique, as she called it, was a trademark of her management style. Before implementing changes in any company she acquired, she would spend a week working incognito in various departments, experiencing the employees' reality firsthand. In the 40th floor break room, Maria found 3 secretaries talking in hushed tones during their break. She entered silently and began cleaning the surfaces while listening. "Did you hear he fired Johnson today? 15 years with the company just thrown away like that," one of them commented, visibly upset. "They say it was just because Johnson suggested a different approach for the Central Park project," another replied, rolling her eyes. "That man is a monster. Keep it down," the third warned. "The walls have ears in this place." Maria pretended to focus on a particularly tough stain on the sink while her attention remained on the conversation. "Did you hear the tower was sold?" the first secretary asked, changing the subject. "Lauren told me Mr. Sterling is furious because he lost a key property to the same company that bought the building. Santos something, right?" "Never heard of them," the second commented. They say it's run by a woman who started from nothing. A true self-made woman, the first explained, with admiration in her voice. Maria hid a small smile as she left the break room. This was exactly why she kept her profile low. She wanted to be judged by her actions and principles, not by her wealth or power. As she approached the elevators, Maria noticed a middle-aged man harshly reprimanding a young assistant who looked on the verge of tears. The man, with a badge identifying him as a director, aggressively pointed at some documents. Incompetent. Do you have any idea how much this mistake could cost us? He bellowed, completely ignoring that they were in a public space. Maria watched the scene with sadness. The toxic culture seemed to permeate every hierarchical level of that building. While waiting for the elevator, her phone discreetly vibrated. It was a message from her personal assistant. Meeting confirmed for tomorrow, 10 a.m. All directors will be present, including Robert Sterling. Do you need anything else for your undercover operation? Maria quickly replied, everything is under control. Tomorrow we'll see if my first impressions are confirmed. The elevator arrived and Maria entered, pulling her cleaning cart. It was empty, which gave her a moment to reflect. In her long career, she had met many Robert Sterlings, men and women who confused power with the right to belittle others, who saw employees as disposable parts rather than human beings with dignity and potential. Her business philosophy was the exact opposite. The Santos Group was known for its policy of human valuation, professional development programs, and profit sharing. Maria firmly believed that a company could only truly prosper when everyone involved prospered together. The elevator stopped on the 45th floor, Robert Sterling's territory. Maria hesitated for a moment, then decided it was a perfect opportunity to observe the epicenter of the problem. She pushed her cart out and began cleaning the glass partitions of the hallway that led to the luxurious president's office. From where she was, she could see Robert through the glass walls of his office, gesturing angrily as he spoke on the phone. His body language transmitted arrogance and impatience. At his side, a tired-looking assistant, probably Lauren, mentioned by the women in the break room, tried to show him some documents, receiving only dismissive waves. "Excuse me, you shouldn't be here," a voice said behind her. Maria turned and saw a man in a suit who seemed to be some kind of manager. "Sorry, sir. I'm just cleaning the hallways," she replied humbly. "The 45th floor has specific cleaning times. We don't want general services employees circulating during business hours," he explained, with a tone that tried to be polite, but exuded disdain. "Come back after 6 p.m. "Certainly, sir." "I apologize for the inconvenience," Maria replied, beginning to gather her supplies. As she returned to the elevator, she noticed Robert abruptly leaving his office, apparently on his way to a meeting. Their eyes met for a brief moment, but to him, Maria was completely invisible, just another unimportant worker in his private kingdom. What Robert couldn't imagine was that in less than 24 hours, he would be face to face with this very janitor, but in completely different circumstances. Maria entered the elevator with a small smile on her lips, anticipating the moment when the masks would fall and the true nature of each person would be revealed. Tuesday morning dawned with a light rain over New York City, blurring the windows of the Lexington Tower and creating a ballet of colorful umbrellas on the sidewalks below. Robert Sterling arrived earlier than usual, annoyed by the news he had received the night before. This Santos Enterprises was not only the new owner of the building, but had also acquired 3 other properties he had been eyeing for future developments. "Damned opportunists," he muttered to himself as he walked through the parking garage. His mood, normally difficult, was particularly dark that morning. The lobby was almost empty at that hour, with only a few early bird employees and the security team. Robert walked directly to the executive elevator, foregoing any greetings. He entered the empty cab and immediately pulled out his phone to check his messages as the doors closed. On the 3rd floor, the elevator stopped. The doors opened, revealing a middle-aged woman dressed in a cleaning uniform, the same one he had completely ignored the day before. Maria entered, pushing her cart of supplies, greeting him with a polite "Good morning." Robert didn't reply. He looked at her for a second, as if assessing an inconvenient piece of furniture, and then took 2 steps back, moving as far away as possible. The elevator wasn't large, and the presence of the cleaning cart made the space even more confined. The awkward silence was broken by the ring of Robert's phone. He answered immediately, not caring about Maria's presence. "Robert Sterling," he announced in his business voice. "Yes, Mark, I'm on my way to the office. What did you find out about Santos Enterprises?" Maria continued to discreetly look ahead, as if she weren't listening, but her ears were attentive. "What do you mean you didn't find anything relevant? A company of that size doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. Hire another investigator if you have to, but I want to know who is behind this by the end of the day." Robert seemed to get increasingly annoyed. The smell of the cleaning products in Maria's cart made his nose wrinkle in distaste. He covered the phone's microphone for a moment and turned to her. "This smell is unbearable. Can't you people use less aggressive products? Or at least use the service elevator?" Maria looked at him with serenity. "Sorry for the inconvenience, sir. The service elevator is under maintenance today." Robert rolled his eyes and returned to his call. "Mark, I have to hang up. I'm stuck in an elevator with, well, it doesn't matter. I'll see you at the meeting." After ending the call, Robert started furiously typing on his phone, trying to ignore the woman's presence beside him. The elevator stopped again on the 20th floor, but no one entered. As the doors closed, Robert couldn't contain his displeasure. "These people should know their place," he muttered, loud enough for Maria to hear. "A building of this caliber should have stricter rules about who can use the main elevators." Maria watched him from the corner of her eye. In her 30 years of building her empire, she had met dozens of men like him, people who confused financial success with human worth, who believed that the contents of a bank account determined the right to respect. "Have you worked in this building for a long time, sir?" she asked with genuine interest. Robert seemed surprised that the janitor had the audacity to start a conversation. He hesitated for a moment, considering ignoring her completely, but his ego got the better of him. "My company was one of the first to set up here when this building was still just a project. I am the founder and CEO of Sterling Investments." Maria nodded as if impressed. "That must be a great responsibility." Robert puffed up with pride. "It's certainly not something just anyone can understand. I built my empire from nothing, without anyone's help. Today we command billions in investments." "Impressive," Maria commented. "Do you think the new building management will bring changes?" Robert's expression instantly hardened. "If you're referring to those amateurs at Santos Enterprises, I doubt they'll last long in this market. New York has unwritten rules about business territory, and they are treading on dangerous ground." At that moment, a strong tremor shook the elevator. The lights flickered, and with a sudden lurch, the cab stopped completely. The emergency lighting came on automatically, bathing the interior in a faint bluish light. "What the hell?" Robert repeatedly pressed the emergency button. "This is all I needed now." Maria remained calm, adjusting her cart to ensure nothing toppled over. "Looks like we're stuck." Robert gave her a furious look as if she had made a profoundly stupid observation. "Brilliant deduction," he replied sarcastically. The elevator intercom crackled. "Passengers, we apologize for the inconvenience. There was an electrical system failure due to the rain. Our technicians are already working to resolve the issue. Estimated time to return to normal, approximately 30 minutes. 30 minutes? Robert exploded, punching the elevator panel. "I have a crucial meeting in 10 minutes. I demand to speak to the person in charge of the building." "Sir, please calm down," the voice on the intercom replied. "We are doing everything we can to resolve the situation as quickly as possible." Robert slammed the intercom off with an unnecessary force and leaned against the elevator wall, closing his eyes and trying to control his accelerated breathing. The space seemed to be shrinking by the minute. Simply perfect. Stuck in an elevator on the day of the most important meeting of the month. And with... He looked at Maria and her cleaning cart, not completing the sentence. Maria noticed his growing discomfort. "Are you okay, sir? You look a little pale." "I'm fine," he replied dryly, although his face had indeed lost some of its color. Robert hated enclosed spaces, something he would never admit publicly. The next few minutes passed in tense silence. Robert alternated between compulsively checking his watch and furiously typing messages on his phone, which fortunately still had a signal. Maria remained calm, occasionally organizing the products in her cart. "I can't believe this is happening today of all days," Robert finally vented, unable to contain his frustration. "I have a meeting with the shareholders to discuss the threat of this new company, and now I'm stuck here with a janitor." The way he said the word janitor carried so much disdain that it sounded almost like an insult. Maria watched him with interest, showing no offense. "Sometimes things don't go as planned," she commented philosophically. "I'm sure your colleagues will understand the situation." Robert laughed bitterly. "In the real world, my dear, delays cost money and opportunities. But I doubt someone who cleans toilets for a living understands that." Maria smiled slightly. "You'd be surprised what you can learn by cleaning toilets. People rarely notice someone holding a mop, so we end up observing a lot about human nature." "Fascinating," Robert replied with biting irony. "And what exactly have your profound sociological observations taught you?" "That often the rudest people are the ones who carry the greatest fears," Maria replied calmly, looking him in the eyes. Robert seemed momentarily taken aback by the direct answer, but soon regained his defensive posture. "Don't give me cheap philosophy. You know nothing about me or my life." "True," Maria agreed, "just as you know nothing about me or my life." The elevator trembled again, making Robert instinctively grab the handrail. Beads of sweat began to form on his forehead, and his breathing became faster. Maria noticed the signs of anxiety. "Do you have claustrophobia?" "Of course not," Robert denied, but his voice betrayed his growing panic. "I have a bottle of water here if you'd like," Maria offered, reaching for her personal bag. "I'm not drinking something that came from your bag," he replied curtly. Maria shrugged and took a sip from her own bottle. "Whatever you prefer." As the minutes passed, Robert's discomfort became increasingly evident. His face was pale, his breathing irregular, and he constantly loosened his tie as if he were suffocating. The Lexington Tower elevator remained motionless between the 30th and 31st floors. 20 minutes had passed since they got stuck, and Robert Sterling's anxiety was growing visibly. His impeccable suit now had sweat stains under the arms. His Italian tie was loose around his neck, and his perfectly coiffed hair was in disarray after repeatedly running his hands through it. "This is unacceptable. A building of this caliber can't have failures like this," he bellowed, punching the emergency panel again. "Hello, is anyone there?" "It's been 20 minutes. The intercom crackled, and a tired voice replied, "We are still working on the problem, sir. The main electrical system was more severely affected by the rain than we thought. We ask for a little more patience." "Patience?" Robert nearly screamed. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I am Robert Sterling, CEO of Sterling Investments. Every minute I'm stuck here costs thousands of dollars. We are very sorry, Mr. Sterling. We're doing everything we can." Robert slammed the intercom off with unnecessary force and leaned against the elevator wall, closing his eyes and trying to control his accelerated breathing. The space seemed to be shrinking every minute. Simply perfect. Just perfect. Maria watched him with genuine curiosity. In her long career, she had met many arrogant executives, but few so openly displayed their contempt for others. "You know," she began casually, "I've worked in cleaning for many years, and I've always been fascinated by how differently people react to their surroundings." Robert opened one eye to look at her. "What do you mean?" "Some people, no matter how rich or important their environment, maintain humility and kindness. Others," she paused meaningfully, "seem to need to put others down to feel bigger." "Are you analyzing me now?" Robert laughed sarcastically. "Let me guess. You studied psychology before deciding your true calling was scrubbing floors." Maria was unfazed by the provocation. "Actually, I have a master's in business administration from Harvard, but life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it?" Robert stared at her with momentary surprise before regaining his expression of disdain. "If you have a master's degree and you're cleaning toilets, you clearly made a lot of wrong choices in life. Or maybe I made exactly the right ones," she replied calmly. "A person's value isn't measured by the position they hold, Mr. Sterling. In the real world, my dear, that's exactly how value is measured," he retorted, feeling recovered enough to resume his usual arrogance. "While I built an empire and employ hundreds of people, you spend your days removing the dirt left by others. Don't talk to me about value." Maria studied him for a long moment. "Do you have children, Mr. Sterling?" The unexpected question caught him off guard. "A son. He's studying in London. Why? And is he proud of the father he has?" Robert frowned. What kind of question is that? Of course he is. I give him everything money can buy. And love? Time? Attention? Do you give him those too? A heavy silence settled in the elevator. Robert felt a wave of irritation. And something else. Something uncomfortable he didn't want to examine too closely. You know nothing about my relationship with my son, he finally replied, his voice lower and less aggressive. You're right, I don't, Maria agreed. Just as you know nothing about my life beyond this uniform. Robert watched her with a mixture of irritation and reluctant curiosity. There was something in the quiet dignity of this woman that intrigued him, despite himself. Then enlighten me, he challenged with sarcasm. What is the fascinating story of the janitor with a master's degree? Maria smiled slightly. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Queens. My parents were blue-collar workers, but they worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs so I could study. I got a full scholarship to college, working as a janitor in the mornings and studying at night. Robert listened in silence, his face revealing slight surprise. I met wonderful people and terrible people along the way, she continued. I learned that a person's true measure isn't in what they have achieved, but in how they treat those who can do nothing for them. The words hit Robert like an invisible punch. For a brief moment, he saw himself through that woman's eyes, a privileged, arrogant man who measured people by the size of their bank accounts. The elevator intercom interrupted the moment. Passengers, we have managed to partially restore power. The elevator will resume functioning in approximately 5 minutes. Finally, Robert exclaimed, quickly getting up and straightening his rumpled suit. He checked his phone. He had completely missed the meeting with the shareholders. Maria also stood up calmly, reorganizing the products in her cart. Robert's brief moment of vulnerability had passed, and his mask of superiority was back in place. Well, that was an educational experience, he commented with an artificial smile. I sincerely hope our paths don't cross again. Maria looked at him directly. You really have no idea who I am, do you? Robert frowned, confused. A janitor with a degree and cheap philosophies about life? At that moment, the elevator trembled slightly and began to move. Maria smiled enigmatically. Mr. Sterling, you just spent almost an hour trapped in an elevator, insulting the president of the Santos Group and the new owner of this building. Robert's face instantly went pale. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Maria Santos, she formally introduced herself, extending her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, although the circumstances weren't the most favorable. Robert stared at her in a state of absolute shock, unable to fully process what he had just heard. His brain was desperately trying to reconcile the image of the simple janitor with the powerful businesswoman who had acquired his building and outmaneuvered his business. This is some kind of sick joke? He finally managed to stammer. No, Mr. Sterling, it's just my working method. Before implementing changes in any company I acquire, I like to understand the reality of the employees firsthand. Maria maintained a calm and professional tone. I must say my experience at the Lexington Tower was quite revealing. The elevator stopped at the main lobby and the doors opened. Outside, a small crowd was waiting, including maintenance technicians and building security. Is everything okay with you, Mr. Sterling? One of the guards asked, noticing his pale face and stunned expression. Before Robert could reply, a man in an impeccable suit quickly approached Maria. Miss Santos, we were worried. Are you all right? Perfectly fine, David, she replied, handing him the fake janitor's badge. It was a very educational experience. The man gave a disapproving look to Robert, who remained frozen in place, trying to process what was happening. Mr. Sterling, Maria said, turning to him one last time, I hope to see you tomorrow at the general meeting at 10 a.m. I have some important announcements to make about the future of this building and the companies that operate in it. She calmly walked away, accompanied by David and 2 other aides who had appeared from nowhere, leaving behind a completely stunned Robert Sterling, whose worldview had just been turned upside down in the space of a few minutes. Who would have thought, he murmured to himself as he watched her walk away. The janitor. For a moment, Robert remained in the Lexington Tower lobby, watching in a daze as the group accompanying Maria Santos left. His mind was still trying to process the bombshell revelation. The simple janitor he had treated with such disdain was, in fact, the powerful businesswoman who had acquired his building and outmaneuvered his business. The man accompanying her, David, from what he had heard, shot one last disapproving look in his direction before opening the door for Maria to get into a Mercedes even more luxurious than his own. "Mr. Sterling, are you all right?" asked Lauren, his assistant, who had come down to the lobby after learning the elevator was fixed. Robert blinked a few times as if waking from a trance. "Yes, Cancel all my appointments for the rest of the day. I need to go home." "But sir, the meeting with the Central Park project investors—" "Cancel it, Lauren," he ordered more harshly than he intended. Seeing his assistant's hurt expression, he added in a more controlled tone, "Please, I'm not in a fit state after that incident in the elevator." The drive to his penthouse in the elegant Upper East Side neighborhood never seemed so long. Robert drove automatically, his mind filled with flashbacks of every arrogant word, every dismissive gesture he had directed at Maria Santos during their forced confinement in the elevator. "You're just a janitor who'll never be anything in life." The words now came back to haunt him, loaded with a cruel irony. In his apartment, Robert poured himself a generous glass of whiskey and walked to the balcony that offered a panoramic view of New York City. Down below, the city went about its normal pace, oblivious to the personal earthquake that had just shaken the very foundations of his life. His phone rang insistently. Mark, his financial director, probably wanting to know about the cancelled meeting. Robert ignored it. After a few minutes, a text message arrived. "I found information on Maria Santos. Urgent, call me." With slightly trembling fingers, Robert returned the call. "Mark, what did you find out?" "Robert, this woman is impressive." Mark's voice overflowed with unusual admiration. "Maria Santos literally started from nothing. The daughter of a laundress and a carpenter from Queens. She graduated with honors from Harvard Business School, as she said, and turned a small hardware store inherited from her father into an empire." Robert took a sip of whiskey, feeling the liquid burn his throat. "Continue." "The Santos Group employs over 10,000 people across the United States. They have a policy of human-centric management that's a case study at Harvard. Profit-sharing, career plans for all levels. Even the cleaning staff have health insurance and scholarships for their kids." "And how has no one ever heard of her here in New York?" Robert questioned, irritation showing in his voice. "That's the thing," Mark explained with growing enthusiasm. "She deliberately keeps a low profile. She rarely appears in the media, avoids social events. They say she personally visits every new acquisition, disguised as a low-level employee, to understand the company culture before implementing changes." Robert closed his eyes, feeling a toxic mix of shame and anger. "And there's more," Mark continued. "Santos Enterprises didn't just buy the Lexington Tower. They acquired 4 other commercial buildings in the city, including the one where MetroCorp, our biggest competitor, operates. In essence, Robert, she now owns the properties where the 2 largest investment firms in the city are located." "Strategically brilliant," Robert muttered, reluctantly impressed. "And the Central Park project? That property we lost to them. I heard they plan to build not a commercial development, but a cultural and educational center for underprivileged youth. A non-profit project." Robert hung up after a few minutes, throwing his phone on the sofa as if the device had betrayed him. The narrative that was forming was devastating to his ego. Maria Santos was not just successful. She represented everything he was not. She had built an empire based on values, not just on profit. She was respected, not feared. She used her power to uplift others, not to belittle them. The night was sleepless for Robert. Between swigs of whiskey and bitter reflections, he relived every moment in the elevator, every word said, every expression of Maria's as he treated her with contempt, how she had maintained her dignity even when he tried to crush her with his supposed superiority. Around 3 a.m., Robert found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He called his son in London. "Dad?" The sleepy voice of Alex, his 22-year-old son, showed surprise at the time of the call. "Is something wrong?" "No, son, Robert hesitated, not knowing exactly why he had called. "I just wanted to know how you're doing." A confused silence hung on the line before Alex replied, I'm good. It's 3 in the morning there, Dad. You never call at this hour. I know, I'm sorry. Robert closed his eyes. Alex, are you proud of me? The question seemed to take the young man off guard. What do you mean? As a father, are you proud of the father I am to you? Another silence, longer this time. Dad, are you drunk? No, yes, a little. But that doesn't matter. Answer the question, please. Alex sighed on the other end of the line. Look, Dad, I'm proud of your professional success, of course. You built an empire from nothing, like you always say. But what? Sometimes I wish you had built less of an empire and more. I don't know. More time for us. After Mom left, it seemed like the company was your only family. The words hit Robert like a bullseye. His ex-wife had left 8 years ago, tired of sharing her life with a man who prioritized business above all else. At the time, Robert considered the separation an inconvenience, almost a favor, one less distraction in his relentless ascent to the top. I understand, he muttered, his throat suddenly dry. Dad, are you really okay? You've never asked a question like this before. Yes, I'm okay. I had a different kind of day. Rest, son. We'll talk later. After hanging up, Robert remained motionless on the sofa for long minutes. His son's words echoed in his mind, intertwining with Maria Santos's in the elevator. A person's true measure isn't in what they have achieved, but in how they treat those who can do nothing for them. For the first time in years, maybe decades, Robert Sterling allowed himself to be brutally honest with himself. What had he achieved, after all? An empire built on intimidation, a reputation as a man to be feared, not respected, a fortune that hadn't bought the admiration of his own son, a life devoid of genuine connections. The morning came, finding Robert still awake, his red eyes fixed on the urban landscape that was beginning to awaken. In a few hours he would face Maria Santos again, this time in a formal meeting where their positions would be reversed. She as the owner, he as the tenant. The man who headed to the bathroom for a cold shower was not the same Robert Sterling who had entered the elevator the day before. Something fundamental had changed, a fissure in his armor of arrogance, a first glimpse of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he had lived his entire life for the wrong values. As he meticulously shaved, Robert made a decision. He would face the meeting not as a humiliation to be endured, but as an opportunity, perhaps his last, to show that there was still something salvageable in his humanity. At the same time, a few miles away, Maria Santos was also preparing for the decisive day. In her simple apartment, considering the wealth she possessed, she was having her breakfast while reviewing the notes she had made during her infiltration of the Lexington Tower. David, I want you to include a discussion on human-centric policies on the meeting agenda, she instructed her assistant, who was already on duty even at that early hour. What I saw yesterday convinced me that we need to implement significant changes in the corporate culture of that building. And what about Mr. Sterling? David asked, who had witnessed the businessman's stunned state the day before. Do you intend to... Maria smiled softly. Robert Sterling is an intelligent man who built a solid business. I have no interest in destroying him, David, but he needed a reality check. You have a very generous heart, David commented, who had worked with Maria for over 2 decades. It's not generosity, it's strategy, she corrected, although her smile contradicted the hardness of the words. People like Robert Sterling can become valuable allies when they redirect their energy for good, or they can become bitter and vindictive adversaries. The choice will be his after today. As she prepared to leave, Maria cast a final glance at the cleaning uniform folded neatly on a chair, a reminder of the lesson she hoped to have taught not only Robert, but all the executives in the Lexington Tower. Promptly at 9:30 a.m., the Lexington Tower lobby began to receive an unusual flow of people. Executives from all the companies located in the building, summoned for an extraordinary meeting with the new owner, arrived in small groups, talking in low tones, speculating about what awaited them. Among the murmurs, Robert Sterling's name was frequently mentioned. Rumors about his encounter with Maria Santos in the elevator had spread with impressive speed. Robert arrived 10 minutes before 10, wearing a discreet navy blue suit, different from the ostentatiously expensive models he used to wear. He had chosen to drive his own car, forgoing the chauffeur. He noticed the curious glances and whispers as he crossed the lobby toward the main auditorium, but he maintained a neutral expression, ignoring the veiled provocations of some competitors who seemed to be relishing in his apparent misfortune. The auditorium, with a capacity for 200 people, was almost completely occupied. In the front row, reserved seats awaited the CEOs and directors of the main companies in the Lexington Tower. Robert briefly hesitated when he saw his name on one of those seats, right next to the chair designated for Frank Carter, CEO of MetroCorp, so his biggest competitor. "Sterling," Frank greeted with a smile that barely hid his satisfaction. "What an unexpected meeting, isn't it? Looks like we have a new boss." Robert nodded briefly and sat down, ignoring the provocation. His gaze was fixed on the empty stage, where a simple table with microphones awaited the representatives of the Santos Group. Exactly at 10 o'clock, a side door opened, and Maria Santos entered, accompanied by David and 3 other executives. Robert watched her closely, noting the subtle differences between the janitor from the elevator and the businesswoman who now presented herself. Maria wore a well-cut women's suit in a deep blue tone, with a pearl necklace as her only ornament. Her hair, previously hidden under a simple cap, was now elegantly styled in a low bun that highlighted her serene features. There was no ostentation in her appearance, just a discreet elegance that conveyed confidence and natural authority. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her clear voice filling the auditorium without needing to be raised. "I appreciate the presence of each of you this morning. As you may already know, I am Maria Santos, president of the Santos Group, which recently acquired this building and other commercial properties in New York." She paused, her eyes scanning the audience before continuing. "Some of you may be wondering why I called this meeting. Or perhaps you are apprehensive about drastic changes to your lease agreements." A slight smile touched her lips. "I can assure you that we are not here to create difficulties. On the contrary." Robert noticed how everyone in the auditorium seemed to absorb every word. Maria had the rare gift of commanding attention, without having to demand it, a quality he had always believed he possessed, but now realized he had won through intimidation, not genuine respect. "Over the past 2 days," Maria continued, "I had the privilege of getting to know this building from a different perspective." Her gaze briefly met Robert's. "I firmly believe that to truly understand an environment, we need to experience it in its most fundamental form. Therefore, as is my custom, I spent some time here as a simple cleaning employee." A murmur swept through the auditorium. Several glances turned to Robert, who maintained an impassive expression, although he felt his face heat up slightly. "What I observed was revealing. I saw talented and dedicated professionals at every level. I also saw a corporate culture that, in many ways, values titles and positions above character and human dignity." Maria paused again, allowing her words to sink in. "The Santos Group is not just a conglomerate of companies. We are a community guided by values. We believe that financial success and human well-being are not mutually exclusive goals. They are, in fact, interdependent." She then detailed some of the initiatives she intended to implement in the Lexington Tower, shared lounge spaces between different companies, cross-mentoring programs, and a professional development center open to employees at all levels, from reception to the presidency. More than just an office building, we want the Lexington Tower to become an example of how the corporate environment can be both productive and humane. Robert listened attentively, surprised to realize that many of the ideas presented were not only innovative but perfectly aligned with problems he himself had identified over the years but ignored, for the sake of practicality and immediate profit. After almost an hour of presentation and questions from the audience, Maria came to the final part of her speech. "Before we conclude, I would like to announce the formation of a consultative committee made up of representatives from the main companies in this building. This committee will work directly with me to implement the proposed changes, ensuring that the specificities and needs of each sector are considered." She consulted a list on her table before continuing. "We invite the following to be part of this committee: Frank Carter from MetroCorp, Sarah Williams from Williams Law Firm, Michael Jones from J&J Tech, and," a brief pause, "Robert Sterling from Sterling Investments." A charged silence of expectation took over the auditorium. All eyes turned to Robert, who couldn't completely hide his surprise. Of all the possible outcomes for that meeting, being invited to work directly with Maria was the last thing he expected. "The nominees can stay after the meeting for a brief chat about the next steps," Maria concluded. "I thank everyone for their presence once again, and I'm available for individual questions during the cocktail reception that will be served in the foyer." As the participants stood up and began to head for the exit, Robert remained seated, processing what had just happened. Frank Carter stopped beside him with a confused expression. "What did you do to deserve this, Sterling? I thought after that elevator incident—" "I'm surprised too, Carter," Robert replied sincerely. When the auditorium emptied, leaving only the 4 executives nominated for the committee, Maria approached them personally, greeting each one. When she got to Robert, she extended her hand with a serene smile. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for agreeing to be part of this committee." Robert shook her hand, noting the firmness of her grip. "To be honest, Mrs. Santos, I don't understand why you chose me after our encounter in the elevator," she completed with a slight smile. "Precisely because of it, Mr. Sterling." Seeing his confused expression, Maria led him to a more reserved corner, while David took care of talking to the other committee members. "You must be wondering why I would put you in a position of influence after the way you treated me," she said directly, with no bitterness in her voice. "The question did cross my mind," Robert admitted. "During my career, Mr. Sterling, I've learned to recognize patterns of behavior. What I saw in the elevator was an arrogant and insensitive man, yes, but I also saw something else. And what would that be?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I saw an intelligent, strategic man with undeniable leadership ability, even if it was misdirected. I saw someone who built a solid and respected business, despite his questionable methods." Maria paused, looking him directly in the eyes. "But more importantly, in the final moments, when you realized who I was, I saw something few would notice." "What?" A spark of authentic shame, not just for being caught in an embarrassing situation, but a deeper shame. The kind that only arises when we are confronted with a truth about ourselves that we have tried to ignore. Robert swallowed hard, surprised by the accuracy of the analysis. "You have the potential to be much more than you are today, Mr. Sterling, not just as a businessman, but as a human being. And I prefer to turn adversaries into allies whenever possible." "What if I don't meet your expectations?" he asked without his usual defensive tone. Maria smiled. "Then I will have made a misjudgment, something that happens occasionally. But I'm a long-term gambler, Mr. Sterling, and I'm rarely wrong when it comes to assessing human character." She discreetly checked her watch. "Our first committee meeting will be next Monday. Until then, I'd like you to reflect on your company, your leadership, and how you could implement some of the practices we discussed today." Before Robert could reply, Frank Carter approached, obviously eager to talk to Maria. She said goodbye with a brief nod and walked away, leaving Robert with his thoughts. At the cocktail reception that followed, Robert watched as Maria moved naturally between groups, listening more than she spoke, treating both executives and the staff, serving the drinks with the same attention. He noticed how people seemed to relax in her presence, how genuine smiles replaced the tense expressions so common in that environment. For the first time in his career, Robert Sterling felt himself in the presence of someone who didn't need to demand respect, someone who inspired it naturally. The feeling was both humbling and liberating. As he watched Maria talk animatedly with one of the building's receptionists, Robert made a silent promise to himself he would not waste this unexpected opportunity. Maybe it was too late to completely remake his life, but maybe, just maybe, there was still time to rewrite his legacy. 6 months had passed since that fateful elevator encounter. The Lexington Tower, once just another elegant corporate building, had been transformed into a space unlike any other in New York City. The once silent and tense hallways now hosted lively conversations between employees from different companies. The old executive cafeteria, once restricted to directors and presidents, had been converted into a shared lounge where interns could sit next to CEOs. On a late Friday afternoon, Robert Sterling was walking through the main lobby when he noticed a group of young people gathered around a table, examining blueprints and models. He approached with curiosity. "Mr. Sterling, good to see you," greeted Chris, not his son, but the young financial analyst who months earlier had helped Maria in her janitor disguise. Now Chris led the Lexington Tower Social Project, an initiative that offered professional mentoring to young people from underprivileged neighborhoods. "How's the project, Chris?" Robert asked, examining the drawings on the table. "Amazing. These are the finalists of the design competition we held in the public schools. The winning project will be implemented in the community center we're building on the Central Park property." Robert observed with genuine interest the enthusiasm of the young students, who initially seemed intimidated by his presence, but soon relaxed upon noticing his real interest in their ideas. It was a reaction he was still getting used to, people who didn't fear him but simply respected him. "Impressive," he commented, pointing to one of the models. "I particularly like the integration between the indoor and outdoor spaces. It reminds me a bit of Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture." The young author of the project, a 17-year-old student from a public school, blushed with pride. "That was exactly the inspiration, sir." "You know about architecture, just the basics," Robert replied with a smile. "But I'd like to know more. Maybe you could explain the details of your project to me." As the young man excitedly explained the concepts behind his design, Robert reflected on how much his life had changed. If someone had told him 7 months ago that he would be genuinely interested in the opinion of a public school student, he would have laughed at the absurdity of the idea. After a few minutes of conversation, he said goodbye to the group and headed to the elevator, the same elevator where his life had taken an unexpected turn. On the way, he passed Lauren, his former assistant, now the manager of special projects at Sterling Investments. "The documents for the meeting with Ms. Santos are already in your office," she informed him. "And your son called. He said the flight arrives tomorrow at 10 a.m. "Thanks, Lauren. You can go home now. It's Friday." "That report can wait until Monday." Lauren smiled, still not completely used to this more human version of her boss. "Thanks, Mr. Sterling. Have a good weekend." On the 45th floor, Robert found his office transformed. The walls that once isolated him had been replaced by glass partitions that maintained privacy without creating barriers. Photos of his son now shared space with images of company projects and community initiatives. He sat at his desk and opened the folder Lauren had prepared. The numbers were impressive. Sterling Investments had not only survived the changes implemented in recent months, but was thriving like never before. The new employee appreciation policy, initially viewed with skepticism by the board, had resulted in higher productivity and lower turnover. The social projects, which Robert had initially considered mere marketing, had opened doors to unexpected partnerships and innovative business opportunities. The intercom buzzed softly. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Santos has arrived for the meeting." "Thank you. Please ask her to come in." Maria Santos entered the office with the same calm that characterized her. She wore a simple yet elegant pantsuit and carried a folder similar to the one Robert was examining. "Good afternoon, Robert. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." "Maria, I was just analyzing the numbers we'll discuss today." The formality of their first meetings had given way to a relationship of mutual respect and, surprisingly, friendship. Robert had discovered in Maria not just a mentor, but an intellectual peer who challenged him like few others in his life. "Before we begin," Maria said, sitting comfortably, "I'd like to congratulate you on the public schools project. Chris told me about your personal involvement. It's exactly the kind of initiative that transforms lives." "Thank you, but the credit is mainly yours. I just helped implement it," Robert replied without false modesty. Maria smiled. "6 months ago, you would have demanded all the credit, even for something you barely participated in." Robert laughed, acknowledging the truth in the observation. "People change." "Some people do," she corrected gently. "The ones who are brave enough to face their own demons." For a moment, they both silently recalled the elevator encounter that had changed everything. "You know, Maria, I've thought a lot about that day," Robert commented. Looking out the window at the New York horizon, what would have happened if the elevator hadn't broken down? If we had just gone our separate ways without that forced conversation? Life rarely offers us moments of clarity by chance, Robert. I believe that one way or another, our paths would have crossed significantly. The meeting that followed was as productive as ever. They discussed the results of the first half under the new shared management, adjusted goals for the coming months, and finalized the details for the inauguration of the Central Park Cultural and Educational Center, which would take place the following week. In the end, as Maria was preparing to leave, Robert stopped her with a question. "Why do you do this, Maria? Why disguise yourself as a low-level employee when you could just hire consultants to evaluate the companies you acquire?" Maria reflected for a moment before answering. "Because consultants see what we expect them to see. They follow scripts, ask predictable questions, and receive rehearsed answers. But when you are invisible, when you are just the person cleaning the floor or serving coffee, you see the true nature of people and the organization." "And what did you see in me that day?" Robert asked, a question that had tormented him for months. "I saw a man who had lost his way," Maria replied with sincerity. "Someone who confused success with value, power with purpose. But I also saw someone capable of change, if only they found the right catalyst. And you decided to be that catalyst," Maria smiled. "Let's just say I recognized the potential for something greater. The rest was up to you." After Maria left, Robert remained in his office for some time, reflecting. The next day, his son would arrive from London for a 2-week visit, the longest in years. They planned not only to attend the inauguration of the Central Park Centre together, but also to visit some of the communities benefiting from Sterling Investments' new social projects. Alex had shown a surprising interest in the changes implemented by his father. In their weekly calls, now a sacred tradition for Robert, the young man expressed both pride and curiosity about this new phase of the family business. At the end of the day, as the sun set over New York, Robert did something he never would have imagined 6 months ago. He took the elevator to the maintenance floor, where he found Joe, the head of the night cleaning crew. "Good evening. Joe, I came to personally thank you and your team for your work. The 45th floor has never been so well kept." The man, initially surprised by the executive's presence in his domain, broke into a genuine smile. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. We do our best. I know you do, and it makes all the difference." As he left the building, Robert noticed how the security guards greeted him not with the reverential fear of before, but with genuine respect. In the parking lot, he stopped briefly beside his Ferrari, admiring the sky that was beginning to show its first stars. His phone vibrated with a message from Alex. "Can't wait to see you." "Dad, I have some incredible news to share." Robert smiled, typing his response. "I'm looking forward to it too, son. I have a lot to tell you about the last few months. I think I finally understand what truly matters." As he drove home, Robert reflected that ironically he had needed to be trapped in an elevator with a supposed janitor to finally feel truly free. Free from the shackles of his own arrogance, free from the weight of a life dedicated only to the accumulation of power and money. Maria Santos had offered him not just a lesson in humility, but a new path, one where success and humanity were not mutually exclusive concepts, where respect did not have to be imposed by fear, and where true leadership came from example and not intimidation. And maybe, Robert thought as the lights of New York City glittered around him, maybe that was the greatest success anyone could achieve. Not the conquest of a financial empire, but the rediscovery of one's own humanity. Música inspiradora e emocionante entra, a voz da IA suaviza. Thank you for watching. We hope Robert and Maria's story has touched your hearts and made you reflect on the true value of human relationships. To continue this journey of emotions and learning, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. You can find it by clicking on the video thumbnail on the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share it with friends and family. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexities of life and make us reflect on our values. And have you ever experienced a situation that completely changed your perspective on life? Tell us in the comments. We look forward to hearing about your experiences.